So up next, we have Doug Landis. He is the growth partner at Emergence Capital, was the chief storytelling officer at Box, also led sales. It was the sales senior director. I just asked you this. I'm sorry. I did. I'm totally forgetting. Senior director of sales operations. Am I right? No.
Continue. Keep going.
You're doing good. At Salesforce. He is also one of our mentors at Accelerprise. He's a badass. This talk is phenomenal, so I'm really excited to introduce him.
Didn't we just talk about that?
Yes, we did. I'm sorry.
It's all good. What's happening? Always be closing? Nah, I would say this. Look, in the world of sales, my time is equally as valuable as your time. I'm in the business of providing solutions that exactly fit. I do not want to waste our time. So does it make sense for us to have another conversation? Easiest thing about selling is to think about selling as a series of conversations. That's all we're doing, is we're talking. And at the end of this conversation, we're going to decide whether it makes sense for us to have another one. And by the way, we're going to determine what that conversation should be all about. So, always be closing? Hell yeah. Because I want to know if it's worth my time for us to continue this conversation. That's my answer. As Whitney mentioned, I've been in sales, my entire career. By the way, I cuss, so if it offends you, raise your hand. I won't do it, but if I don't see any hands, fuck it. All right, good. Cool. So, growth partner at Emergence Capital. At the end of the day, I'm an operator. I'm a salesperson at heart with a marketing mind, so I'm kind of twisted. Emergence Capital, for those of you who don't know, we do early stage investments, hyper focused on B2B enterprise SaaS. That's it. We do Series A's and B's. Been around, so 16 years ago, we had a thesis which is all enterprise software was going to move to the cloud. We were the first investors in Salesforce. Pretty good idea, right? And then SuccessFactors, ServiceMax, Viva, Box, Yammer continues. The list goes on and on. So if you're a B2B SaaS, and you've got hyper growth and you want to be a $1 billion software company, come talk to us. We might have an idea or two. My job's unique in that when we do invest in a company, I get to step in and help you figure out how you're going to scale and grow from $1 million to 10 to 100 to wherever you want to go. A big part of what I do is help our companies figure out how to tell their story. So that's what we're going to talk about. 400,000 years ago, men and women used to sit around a fire pit and tell the story about their day. Today on Necker Island, Sir Richard Branson, he commissioned a local artist to actually build a fire pit where now, once a month, him and his team sit around that fire pit and tell the story of what's going on in their world. The reality is we've been telling stories for thousands of years. It's a part of our human DNA. It's how we operate. It's kind of part of our ethos. But the crazy thing is, why do we suck at telling stories at work? Why is it so damn hard? We're going to spend the next 30 minutes breaking down how you can become a better storyteller and how you can tell your story. We're going to talk about why stories matter, the power of story. I'm going to give you guys a framework you can use. I'm also going to give you 2 homework assignments. I'm not going to follow up on that. You can send it to me. And then lastly, I'm going to focus on how to tell your story, your company's story. Super important. The founder story. What exactly should you say? What shouldn't you say? A lot of you are founders, and if you're product-led founders, you're engineers at heart, guess what? You may be thinking, I'm an engineer, storytelling way over here. It doesn't coexist together. Bullshit. It totally coexists. All of us are innate storytellers. You just got to tap into it and understand how to do it. Cool? All right, so why do stories matter? Well, stories matter for a number of reasons. First and foremost, stories, it's interesting. When people like rant or they give you their opinions, they list a whole bunch of facts, we tend to shut off. But when someone tells you a story and they're a really good orator, what happens? You lean in, like, ooh, tell me more. Tell me more. You have those friends that are great storytellers. Everybody shuts up when they start talking because you're like, oh, this is going to be fun. That's what happens with stories. The other thing about stories is they inspire and they enlighten and they educate us. But what's really interesting for all of us product leaders, stories make complex ideas very simple and easier for us to consume. The language that we use in the Valley, we're so screwed up. Like seriously, leave the Valley and go have a conversation with somebody. They'll be like, what the hell are you talking about? Especially in the flyover states. And lastly, what we know about stories is they help build connection. Because the moment someone's telling you a story, you put yourself into that story. You try and figure out, how does this relate to me? And that connection is what builds relationships. And if you want to sell, you need to have that connection. That's also how you build empathy. So that's why stories matter. You know what? Think about it this way. People may not remember what you said or what you did, but they will always remember how you made them feel. You tell a great story that has some energy and emotion in it, guess what? People will remember that, especially if you make them laugh. If you make them cry, they may not want to remember it. It's true. So thinking about this and recognizing the fact that from this day forward, you are going to be building a shit ton of presentations, then I give you this. Your job is to wrap all of your ideas in a narrative. Don't give me tech specs. I don't care. Wrap it in a narrative so that I can consume it. Because that's how, as human beings, we actually consume information in story form. So the truth is, you can become a great storyteller because great storytellers are born, they are not made. All great orators are born out of practice and they're born out of an understanding of what it takes to become a great storyteller. The core, the most important skill to become good at is listening. Because through listening, and it's not just with your ears, it's with your body, it's your energy. Listening actually gives you information that you can then turn around and use in story form. So as a result, if you believe the fact that we process information through story, you guys need to be telling more stories. The challenge is, I think a lot of people think that, well, telling stories, it's always like a 2 to 3 to 9 minute diatribe. I don't have time for that. You're wrong. You can tell a story in 6 words or less. I'm going to tell you how to do that in 2 minutes. So if we process information through story, then one of the things that you have to do, challenge number 1, is bring your weekend self to work. Think about this. Now, granted, you guys are startup founders, so work is 24/7. I get it. But when you are not working and you're hanging out with friends, significant others, wives, husbands, whatever, what happens? You tell a story. You guys are all going to leave and you're going to tell a story about your evening. Oh, we had this great speaker, Whitney. She's amazing. Her last name's Sales and she's in sales. That's crazy. You're going to tell stories about your day. Why is it that when we go to work, what do? We speak in bullet form, right? We just spew facts and figures and statements. Like, what the hell is that? Why aren't we telling more stories? So my challenge for you is to start bringing your weekend self to work. Just try it. Try telling more stories. When you're going to tell somebody something, wrap it in a narrative. Secondly, when you're building a presentation, remember 65% of that presentation should be story form. If you've got 10 slides, 6 out of 10 should have some sort of narrative wrapped around those slides. Why? Because it's easier to consume. Put yourself in their shoes. Think about how difficult it is for you to articulate the value of 6 cents, a very big and very complex, complicated product. If you don't know about it, it's amazing, but it's also very difficult to understand and wrap your arms around. So how do you create that narrative around a complex idea to make it simple? It's the idea of hey, how do I explain this to my mother who's in her 70s and has nothing to do with technology, calls me because her iPhone's not working. I'm not tech support, Mom. Right? So think about that. How do you incorporate more stories in your presentations? Let's talk about the power of stories. So that's why stories matter. We got to do it more. Very valuable. Now let's talk about the power of story and how we can leverage the power of stories. The truth is, stories are remembered for 3 reasons. First, they're interesting and they connect to the audience. We just talked about this. But what's really interesting is when you're telling a story, the listener tends to be way more attentive and engaged versus if I'm listing a whole bunch of facts. Telling a story, you guys are like, whoa, tell me more. I want to lean in. And especially if you have a story that has emotion, it's actually a lot easier to remember. Let me give you an example. Nordstrom's. When you think of Nordstrom's, I'm going to do this. When you think of Nordstrom's, what's one of the first things you think of? The brand name. This is always a good test to see how old everybody is. When you think of Nordstrom's, what do you think of?
Shoes.
Okay, shoes. Expensive. That's always a good one. What else? Customer service. Who said that? Okay, why do you know that?
Because I've shopped there and it's just amazing.
Great.
I used to live in Europe and I used to come in and pick up clothes in advance and then hold them until the next sale would happen and then fly back in and then they would give me all the
Wow, that is a savvy shopper. He was talking about how, never mind, I don't need to get into his story. But the reality is this. Nordstrom's is known for a number of things, but one of the things that they are known for is their level of customer service. Does anybody know why? You know the story. Okay, do you want to tell it?
Somebody returned a tire.
Yes.
Yes, but they didn't sell tires.
Yes.
They accepted it.
Correct. Okay, you win a prize. I have nothing for you, but you win a prize. So, in the 70s, at a Nordstrom's in Anchorage, Alaska, it actually used to be a tire store. Nordstrom's has a philosophy of the customer is always right, and a brand new sales associate who had just gone through training was working the counter, and a gentleman walked in and said, I want to return these 4 tires to your store. It's a clothing store, not tire store. The young gentleman said, okay, and together they decided how much they were going to refund him, and they gave him his money back for those 4 tires. Hence the story of customer service and Nordstrom's being known for their customer service. It's all over the place. It's one singular event that created that helped to create that brand. Isn't that crazy? In the early 70s in Anchorage, Alaska. That's what that story says, by the way. It's just better if I tell it versus you reading it. That's one example. Number 2, the power of story. Stories, as you know, they provide a way to organize information, right? Because we've got a beginning, a middle, and an end. Pretty straightforward. We have characters. We've got a hero, a villain. What's really interesting about stories too, when you hear a story, a lot of times you want to try, because you're trying to put yourself in the story, you might link it to some prior knowledge, right? If I can wrap a complex idea into a narrative, all of a sudden I can make a connection to something else that might be related to it. So you can link it to something. Now all of a sudden you're more involved in the story. The more involved you are in a story, guess what? The more bought into that story you are. All of you people in sales, tell more damn stories. Because, if you have sales in your title, nobody believes you anyway. So why not start telling more stories? It's true. At the end of the day, though, stories are more memorable than a set of facts. Now, I don't care what your political disposition is, but I tell you what, during the election between Hillary and Trump, they were throwing out so many facts of shit that I cannot remember. But the one thing I do remember is exactly where I was at the time, what I was doing when I found out that Trump won. I'm willing to bet that many of you have a similar story. Where were you? When? Because guess what? Facts fade. Stories stick. Tweet that. I'm just saying, it's just how we compartmentalize, because as human beings, we consume things in story form. In fact, that's what we're doing when your people are sharing information. When Whitney's putting up her method, you're trying to wrap it in a narrative in your head so you can remember it. How many people right now, without looking at your notes, could list everything she listed in the sales method? It's really tough, right? When you list a bunch of facts, it's hard to remember. Suggestion, wrap it in a narrative.
Got it.
Okay. I mean, you started it with the sales method. No, is that right? Sales method. Okay, see, there it is. Now I want some more context.
Got it.
Cool. Okay. So they connect with the audience. It's an easier way to organize and thus remember. Tip number 3, the power of story is they're incredibly persuasive. They can be incredibly persuasive if utilized correctly. Here's the interesting thing. If I give you a fact, as human beings, the first thing you're likely going to do, wow, it got really dark in here.
Turn off the lights.
Yeah. The first thing you're likely going to do is refute it. If I list a bunch of facts, as human beings, we're going to try, validate that. I don't believe it, right? But if I tell you a story, it's really hard to argue with somebody that's telling a story. Yeah, maybe you may disagree with how much they embellish the story, but are you going to be like, your story is bullshit, I don't believe a word of it? No. But if I tell you 65% of your presentation should be story form, you're like, well, why 65%? Why not 70? Why not 50? I don't get it. It's what happens with facts. So stories can be incredibly persuasive. Now the reality with story though is you don't need to fill in all the details, because when people deduce the logic themselves, they are now more ingrained into the story. So think about that. Don't tell them everything. Let your audience infer what 2 + 2 means. You don't have to tell. This is why people worry about stories, because like, oh, there's 9-minute diatribe. Well, guess what? I can tell you a story in 6 words. It takes 5 seconds. And you can fill in all the details. And in fact, anybody heard of Ernest Hemingway before? Okay, good. Whew. Oh, wow, there we go. Okay, so Ernest Hemingway was sitting at a bar. Gentleman walked up, put $10 on the table and said, I bet you cannot write a novel in 6 words or less. And he did. Do you know what it is? I know. Oh, you do? Hey, what is it?
For sale, baby shoes, never worn.
Bingo. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. It's typically what happens when you read that. You're like, oh shit, what happened to the baby? So why does everybody go to a dark place with that? It's pretty crazy. But the simple fact is, you're automatically, as soon as she said that, and as soon as you saw that, you're filling in all the details. You're filling in the narrative of that story. And so, a challenge for you. Can you tell your company story? Can you write your company story in 6 words or less? Oh, that's interesting. Let me give you some examples of some other 6-word stories that are kind of fun. I loved her, she loved him. You fill in the details of what happened. Or I married the wrong girl, fixed it. Or getting older, ringtones piss me off. I love it. Right? 6-word stories can be incredibly powerful and also incredibly useful. So stories don't need to be these long, drawn out diatribes. Ben Horowitz said, you can have a very compelling product, but if you don't have a compelling story, it's hard to get people motivated. It's true. You can have the best product in the world, but if you don't have a great story to tell, beyond just the founder story, which we'll talk about in a second, then you got nothing. You got a product. And there are a lot of other products out there. Stories, great orators, are what get people motivated. It's also what helps you to build culture. If you're building a company, do not forget about building culture. Don't just focus on the product. To me, a compelling company story is what I call a signature story. And a signature story is an authentic, real part of who you are that actually helps to drive growth in your organization, either through brand or through your organization or through your strategy. Your signature story actually explains the why. Why do you exist? All too often we talk about what you do and how you do it. But as Whitney was alluding to, I want to know the why are you doing what you're doing? Because there is some grit in there. There is some juice in there. Because guess what? A lot of people can build a company. A lot of people can code. A lot of people can build what you're building. But a lot of people don't have your why. And that's what I want you to get to, is the why do you exist? So, challenge number 2. What was the first challenge? Bring your weekend self to work. Challenge number 2. Answer this question for yourself. Why does your company exist, and why do you work for your company? Of course, if it's your company, that's kind of one and the same. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to talk about why your company exists. Why did you decide to solve this particular problem? It's so important. Accounting software, not super sexy. Why did you get into accounting? Interesting question. You got into it as a profession. But why? What was it? Are you a numbers guy? You just love numbers? It was a terrible problem? Like, why? I'm picking on you for a sec. Okay, here's the thing. Signature stories, the why your company exists, is just one of a number of stories that you're going to have to tell. What other stories do you think you need to be able to tell besides why your company exists? Interaction. What other stories do you think you need to be able to tell well besides why your company exists? Why would somebody want to buy your product? Okay, so maybe a customer story. Cool, what else?
Where is it headed?
Why would you want to work here? Cool, you were listening. What else?
What problem you're solving?
Okay, what problem you're solving. What else? Yeah, who are you? Great. Yeah, where'd you come from? What's that?
What does it look like in 5 years, 10 years?
So your future self story. Cool. As you can see, there are a lot of different stories we have to be able to tell. So why aren't we telling more damn stories at work? Right? If you just think about it, we got customer stories, your personal story, you've got product stories, and you've got user stories. We also have competitive stories. A lot of different stories we could and should be able to tell. In every one of those categories, you better have a story that you can pull out of your back pocket at any moment in time. Right? Not just something that is rote, and not, a long novella that is often listed as your customer success story, which is here's the problem, here's the company background, here's the problem, here's the solution, here's the ROI. Break it down. Give it a narrative. Give it a character. Give it some emotion. Now, I want to do two things. I want to introduce you to a framework that you can use to become a better storyteller, and then we're going to talk about how to tell your company story in maybe a more memorable way. Cool? Okay, so to become a better storyteller, I want you to always think about putting somebody in a trance. You're listening to me now. Hear my voice. No, if someone's telling you a good story, that's what happens when you lean in. You're like, oh, I'm in, I'm all in, I'm bought in. Okay, this is an acronym. The first letter stands for take them on a journey. Your job when you're telling a story is to take somebody from where they are to what's possible, to where they could be. What I'm addressing here is this thing called contrast. Contrast is one of the most important characteristics in telling stories. Twilio, when they first got started, where were you? You were your customer. Where did they go? Where are you going as a sales leader, Allison, who's going to be on the panel soon? Right? Contrast. Where are you to where you can go or where you want to be? That's T. R. Remember the rule of three, beginning, middle, and end. It has to have some flow, an arc. By the way, it doesn't have to be, here's my beginning, here's my middle, here's my end. Again, you can tell a story in 6 words and let everybody fill in the details, but there needs to be some element of an arc because that's how we remember things. A, super important, analogies and metaphors. Okay, here's another homework assignment, but it's not written down. It's incredibly powerful. My company is like ... Fill in the blank. My company is like. My product is like. Analogies and metaphors are incredibly powerful ways to articulate complex ideas and to get somebody to understand complex ideas. One of our companies, it's a company called Guru. Guru is like your favorite barista. When you walk into the coffee shop, he just hands you your coffee and you don't even have to think about it. Did I talk about the product at all? No. But I gave you something to connect to. I know what it's like when I walk into my favorite Starbucks or Pete's or whatever it is, and then my barista knows me by name, and they're like, oh, would you like your almond milk latte? And I'm like, yes, I would. Thank you very much. Here's my phone. I'm paying. Technology. Whoa, hey. That's analogies and metaphors. N. Organize your narrative. That also means you have a character. Companies are not characters. Cisco is not a character. I'm looking at you for Cisco because Cisco's a massive 6th Sense customer. But when I bring up Cisco, there's probably 50 different definitions of who they are and what they do. Cisco as a company is really difficult to relate to. But Sue, a mid-level marketing manager at Cisco, is a hell of a lot easier to relate to. So when you're thinking about your characters, your heroes and your villains, give them names. I don't care if you're making it up. I don't care if Sue doesn't even exist. By the way, I just made it up. Doesn't matter, but Sue's a hell of a lot more easy. She's easier to relate to than Cisco the company. Companies are not characters. All right, C. We just talked about characters, heroes and villains. Oh yeah, the N was making it relevant to your audience. Standard. E, always want to have an emotional experience in your story. The contrast helps you to paint picture and use emotion because you're articulating what was to what it can be. But you want to have some chutzpah in there. You want something real and tangible, which is why customer stories are so powerful because you're painting a picture of where that customer was and what they were struggling with and how much their life sucked before you. Right? And it's even the words that you use to tell your story can help to infuse more emotion. So that's a framework that you can use to become a better storyteller. Think about putting your audience into a trance. And yes, I will give this to you, so you don't have to take a photo. You can have the deck. All right, now here's what I want to do is I want to talk about how to tell your story in the next 4 minutes. Your story being your company story. Because I'm willing to bet 98% of you got it all wrong. Sorry, but guess what? We're going to fix that. Here's what I mean when I say that. Stories are critical to your ability to message and position your company properly. Critical. The reality is when you first get started, or when you first started, depending upon how far along you are, this is probably your journey. And this is where people make their first mistake. You identify a problem, you're like, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had a better accounting software? I'm going to pick on you for a second. And then, let's make a better accounting software. You're like, great, cool, awesome. And I deliver this solution either on a mobile device or a web. I get some customers, some early beta customers, or some paying customers. It's great. And then I go out and I raise money. Right? And I use all this traction that I have. I've got $1 million in revenue. And I go out and I raise seed money, or I go out and I raise the Series A. And then guess what happens? I take that same deck that I created for my investors, and I use that as my pitch deck for my reps. It happens all the time. Oh, a little tweaker there, here or there, right? Oh, let me pull out the financial model. They don't need to see that. But everything else, here's our story, right? What's the problem with that? Different audience. What else? Thank you, Allison. It's ridiculously arrogant because it's all about you. Investor pitches should not be your pitch deck or your sales pitch deck because they're all about you. The reality is you need to make it about them. Great pitch decks, messaging and positioning is all about them, which is why Allison is such a badass, because she gets it. We go way back, so I can pick on her. So, to nail your messaging and positioning and make it about them, how do you do that? Well, I say, turn everything you do upside down. Flip it upside down. Because when you make your messaging and positioning and every single story you tell about them, guess what? You get credibility. Because if you're in sales, you have zero credibility because you're in sales and nobody trusts you. Sorry. Don't worry, I'm a salesperson at heart, so I fall in the same bucket. I'll fall on the same sword. If you're a founder or CEO, you have a little bit more credibility because by default, you know more about the market and the industry that you're serving, so therefore, you have some level of credibility. Other than that, you got none. The credibility that you have is from whom? The credibility that you have, you are earning it from whom? Your customers. Your customers. So if you have one customer, guess what? That's how you're starting to build credibility. If you've got 1,000, you got a lot of customers to help you build your story. But all it takes is one customer to help you start to build that story. So how do we do this? How do we make our pitch decks more customer-centric? Let me introduce you to messaging framework. That's how you turn your story upside down. The first thing that I want you to do is I want you to use that opening slide of yours to say something provocative. Slide 0. How many times do you deliver your presentations over Zoom or WebEx or something, or Join Me or whatever? How many people do that? Okay, should be everybody. Cool. Guess what? What happens when I get on the phone or I log in? The first thing I see is what? I don't see your ugly mug. I see a slide. I see a slide. And the first question I have is, why am I here? Every meeting we go into, 9 times out of 10, we walk in, we're like, what am I doing here? What's this about? I don't get it. That's incredible real estate. Say something. Provoke them to think. Don't just say, 6 cents. Picking on you again. Right? Say something interesting. So use that real estate. That's your opening slide. Slide number 1. This is your credibility slide. You know how often, you know what everybody typically does? Okay, first slide is like, okay, here's what we do. Second slide, here's our logos. Look at all our customers. Asshole. Nobody cares. So, but what you can do is take all those logos and turn that around and say, guess what? We have learned from all of these companies. And you know what we've learned? Let me tell you. These are the problems that we're helping them solve. Problem 1, problem 2, problem 3, problem 4, problem 5. By the way, I'm willing to bet that you didn't think about problem 3, 4, or 5, did you? We didn't. All of a sudden, we started supporting these customers, and they told us what they struggled with and how we're helping them. Over the last 5 years, we've learned from thousands of companies from all over the world. Here's an interesting one that a lot of people don't talk about in the world of SaaS that you should start talking about if you can do it. SaaS applications are incredibly easy to buy. They're incredibly easy to turn off, theoretically, right? They're very easy to buy and turn off. You know what's the most difficult thing to do in the world of SaaS? Change. Close to implement. Change behavior. I don't care how easy your product is, I still have to change my behavior in terms of how I work. And so I might be used to using old green screens, right? I might just be used to it. And so now you're asking me to change, and that's really difficult. So if you can help me change, if you can help our entire organization change, you're winning. That's something a lot of people don't talk about, because I don't care what solution you choose. At the end of the day, you've got to think about how you're going to drive change management across the organization. We do it better than anybody else. That's interesting. Have you thought about that? No, we haven't. Cool. Change is really, really difficult. Your job here on slide 2 is to introduce problems your customer hasn't fully considered. And somebody mentioned, well, how do you ask questions in the middle of a pitch? I think you asked that earlier. In the middle of a pitch session, how do you ask questions? Right here. Here are problems that our customers have shared with us over the years that we've been working with them. How does that resonate with you? How would you stack rank these problems in your organization? Boom. Now we're having a dialogue, because this isn't just about me presenting. Slide number 3 is what I call unidentified flying problems. So here we're demonstrating that you're not alone. Here we're introducing new problems that they haven't quite considered. Slide number 4, statistics. What statistics do you have about your industry or your customers that you serve that you can use to elevate the pain of these problems? How difficult? Well, 85% of the time, people don't do X, right? What statistics do you have, and how can you leverage those? Slide 5, tell a real story. Sue, that mid-level marketing manager at Box, this is our story. It's like, guess what? Mid-level marketing manager, mother of 2, cannot work from home. Her child is sick. Guess what? With Box, she can, because she can get access to everything she needs to work. Right? That's Sue. Think about how Sue's job has changed, how her life has changed. By the way, your customer success organizations, or people, if you have them, people in customer success, they capture these stories. That's what they do, because they're helping you to implement. So they're learning more specifically how your product is changing somebody's life. That's valuable. That gets people to listen. Slide 6, you're introducing the idea of a new way. What if there was a different way to actually think about this problem? A way that was faster, easier, cheaper, whatever it may be. You're just trying to get them to think differently. And then slide 7, you know what you do? Now you introduce your company. By the way, you'll notice 6 slides, I have said nothing about who I am and what I do. I don't talk about it until I have built that level of credibility and helped you understand that I get you. That's what we need to do. I got to demonstrate some level of understanding and then introduce a new way of thinking, and therefore a new way of actually solving said problem. What do you think? I got a thumbs up over here. Anybody else? Can anybody raise the thumbs up? There you go. Thank you. All right, so remember this. Messaging and positioning, by the way, it needs to be tweaked depending upon if it's your company message, your sales message, or your marketing message. But no matter what the message is and how you're positioning your company, the most important thing you can do is leverage the voice of your customers, whether that's 1 customer or 5,000 customers. It does not matter. Use their voice. Even in the middle of a sales call and you're having a discovery conversation and someone brings up an objection, you're like, that's really interesting. I was at HP the other day and they brought up a very similar concern, but what they shared with me was X. I'm not the person saying it. I'm actually using HP's voice to respond to said objection. That's interesting. Because remember, they have more credibility than you do, even if you're the founder and CEO. To get better at storytelling, I got some books you may want to read. Again, I'll send out this deck, but these are awesome. By the way, Made to Stick is like a marketing book, but it's incredibly powerful when it comes to messaging and positioning. Anyway, there you go. And if you want to get a hold of me, I'm just at Doug Landis or Doug at MCAP.
Thank you, Doug.
Questions?
2 questions, and then we got to get to the break. So.
Totally. I was
Question.
sorry, 5 minutes late.
Question.
Yes, Fabio.
So I often hear advice about building slide decks or fundraising to make them very rigid, like there's problem, solution, traction, etc. Should I incorporate more storytelling?
Why? You know the answer to that.
Okay.
You don't even need to hear me answer that. But here's the thing. That's a framework. Problem, you got problem, solution, value, right? Cool.
Right.
Tell a story about the problem.
Sure.
Don't just say, here's the problem we're solving. No, tell a story about the problem, why it's a problem. How do you know it's a problem? How have you validated that it's a problem? Tell a story around each one of those. You can still address those 3 buckets, just create that narrative, wrap that narrative around those ideas. Cool? Yes?
So I love the story of Sue, who mom of 2 can work home because boss can do that.
Yes.
What if another party during your meeting say, can I do this with Dropbox?
You totally can.
Then what do you say? Just
Absolutely. Well, we're not there yet.
So you just try. You actually don't. You don't wait competition. Just say like.
I mean, it's like I said before. Great. There are a lot of ways in which you could solve for working from home, right? There are some compliance issues that you may have to deal with, but at the end of the day, no matter what you choose, you still have to figure out how to drive change behavior across your entire organization. Let me give you some stories about how we've done that at other companies just like yours. I'm not afraid of the competition, but I'm also, the other thing about handling objections, write them down ahead of time. Make sure you're really clear about what questions you're going to ask so that you're responding to the right objection. Is the objection actually about the product? Is it about price, or what is it? And then also make sure you write down your responses. Cool. All right, that's 2 questions. I'm late. I'm over. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Doug.
Appreciate it.